Good morning and welcome. Sorry, is this working? Yeah. Hello, good morning and welcome to the first in a series of investment symposium which are targeted at, well, you, the investor, in essence. Sorry, I did this yesterday. I really must introduce myself. My name's Atam Sandhu. I'm the Chief Executive of Developing Markets Associates. DMA, Developing Markets, as the name suggests, we encourage investment into the emerging market area and into the emerging market space in general. We organize investment summits for governments. This is the first time that we're organizing an investment summit, an investment symposium for investors, trying to bridge the gap between an investment and the investor. As a World Bank report last week highlighted, the need and the desire and the trend now for crowdfunding is becoming immense, and there's an immense amount of interest in looking at collectivized investment. And West Africa is just one of the most interesting spaces in that respect. Last week we held a summit for the government of Côte d'Ivoire on investing into Côte d'Ivoire. Time and time again at that investment summit, which was led by the Prime Minister, the issue of Africans in diaspora, people interested in the African area, interested in investment opportunities, came up time and time again. I don't know whether any of you are trying to invest in the UK at the moment, but if you are, I know that my bank offers me 0.5% if I were to invest any sum of money in the UK, and the potential in Sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in West Africa, is many, many more times that. And we're going to hear about a lot of those projects, a lot of those investable opportunities during the course of today. I shan't take up too much of your time. I just wanted to say those few words on what we're doing today. We are expecting an enormous number of pre-qualified people in who have an investment interest in West Africa to come today. So I hope it's going to be productive for everybody involved. With that, I'd like to actually begin the program straight away. I'd like to invite Agnes Downey, who's the head of economic research from EcoBank, to begin. Please welcome Agnes.
Hello, good morning. My name is Angus Downey. I work for EcoBank. I head up economic research. And hopefully we've got my presentation, which is going to be quite short. It's just coming up. So if we just wait one moment. Here we go. See a number of familiar faces, so it's nice to see you. Hopefully we'll catch up in time afterwards. But for everyone else that is new to me and to EcoBank, we are a bank operating in 35 different countries across Middle Africa, retail, corporate and investment banking services. And I sit in London looking at the economic research function, and mainly that's looking at financial markets, so FX and fixed income, but also economic policies in all the countries that we're operating in, as well as some of the more general economic issues. So what I would like to do this morning is quite briefly just give you an overview of where we see things at the moment in terms of the economic space, but also more importantly, look a little bit further out, look at some of the risks and some of the opportunities in the African space. And Atam mentioned some of the investment opportunities. There are some very attractive ones there. They obviously come with risks, and that's something that I'd like to also highlight, because I think any investor that's looking to invest needs to be aware of not only what they're investing in, but some of the parameters and the risks associated with what their investments are. So let me get started. I don't want to dwell too much on the global economy, because I think we all read newspapers, we're all pretty much briefed on what's happening in the US and the Eurozone. But I think it's worth pointing out that growth is picking up, albeit moderately and unevenly, highlighted in the IMF's recent World Economic Outlook that was published last month. And there's also some major problems to be resolved, not only in the Eurozone, but also the fiscal and the debt challenges, in inverted commas, that we see in the US. And they're all going to come back to the fore early next year, late January, and in early February. So I think those are major problems that are going to upset investors and markets, continue to create uncertainties. And I think it's also worth noting that it was just sort of 3-4 weeks ago that the US came very close to being in a position of defaulting for the first time ever on its debt obligations. So I think just with that as a background to look at, we're still in very uncertain territory, 5, nearly 6 years after the whole global crisis started. So Africa works within this context. And when you've got uncertainties in these big developed economies, they do have an impact on Africa, albeit depending on which country in Africa you're looking at, there's a different effect. But I think what is clear to us is the continued weakness of this recovery in the US and the Eurozone, and the added burden that the emerging markets, the South's story, it's not really as strong as we first thought. Around about 18 months ago, there was a lot of belief that the Brazils, the Chinas, the Russias, they could really work by themselves, trade amongst themselves, and bypass a lot of the problems that were originating in developed economies. That, I think, has been shown to be not quite as robust a view as we'd first thought. And I think, it's not surprisingly, Middle Africa and ECOWAS, to some extent, will be affected by this emerging market reliance still on developed economies and the whole problems with developed economies more generally. Despite the global crisis, growth in Middle Africa has strengthened, and Africa, as you can see, it's moved from being a laggard in the 1990s to now promoting some of the strongest growth that we see in the world at the moment. And also you can see that ECOWAS, I'm sure you're familiar with the economic community of West African states, they are growing exceptionally strong in the next 3 to 5 years. And although we're looking at just the most recent growth that's been recorded, the IMS WEO that I mentioned earlier, that really is looking in the next sort of 5 years with real growth rates of around 5, 6, 7%. And if you compare what is the growth in the Eurozone at the moment, there isn't growth, it's still contracting this year. It's around about 0.4% smaller this year compared to last. Real growth of around 5 or 8% is really very dynamic in comparison. And it just goes back to highlight some of the really interesting things that are happening in these economies, particularly in West Africa. However, although we've got this strong growth, I think ECOWAS and Africa more generally, it's a very complex environment, and there's many external and domestic factors that could derail growth, and I'll come to that in a slide or two. The macroeconomic context for ECOWAS this year, and I think probably next year, has been and will be shaped by several issues. First is the continuation of the global crisis. The second is the search for yield by developed economy investors. And the third is the emerging market growth story I mentioned earlier, which isn't quite as strong as we first thought. So sitting within these very strong forces, ECOWAS particularly, West Africa, it's really growing amongst itself through some very dynamic activity domestically. But these external forces, what's happening in the US and the Eurozone particularly, will continue to have a major impact on growth in the region. And if we just look at currencies, because any investor needs to invest in the local currency most likely. If we just look further ahead, the outlook for ECOWAS currencies is mixed. We've got two main types of currency regimes there. We've got the fixed peg of the CFA franc in the UMO zone. It's pegged to the euro. And then we've got all the other local currencies, which are a mixture of free floats, but mostly managed floats. So the Nigerian naira, for example, is a managed float. It's sometimes referred to as a commodity currency because a large portion, something like 97% of Nigeria's export revenues come from oil, all of which is sold in US dollars. So that's why we look at the dollar, what's happening with that, in terms of the Nigerian naira and looking at the directions it's going to be heading in. I think there's several positive and negative forces for currencies, not only in West Africa, but Africa more generally. And they highlight a couple of things. One is the prospect of rising export revenues, which provides this whole purchasing power parity push to currencies. But there are also some negative forces, such as strong import demand and capital flight. And those really are covered in what we call UIP, uncovered interest parity. PPP, UIP, getting a bit technical, I won't bore you with those details, but that's what does drive currency valuations to a large extent. And I think overall, in the longer term, what we're going to be seeing is the positive forces coming through and really supporting these currencies. So stronger levels of exports, growth in export revenues, that's a very strong positive force, as is the capital coming into Middle Africa and particularly ECOWAS, capital from portfolio investors that are non-resident into equities and fixed income. That's very positive. And I think they're going to be at the fore, and they will outweigh the negative forces, which is this import demand and capital flight, which I think over the next sort of couple of years will remain quite strong before the positive forces take hold. So I think the bottom line really from this slide is that currency weakness in ECOWAS, excluding the CFA franc because of its peg to the euro, but possibly because of the peg to the euro, depending what happens in the eurozone, if it blows up, which is unlikely, but who knows. I think currency weakness driven by uncertainties in the global economic environment are likely to continue for the short term, but longer term, we've got some more positive developments feeding through as these economies in the ECOWAS region strengthen. Risks I mentioned at the beginning, and I think it's very important to be aware of them. I think there are probably 6 main ones that we see sitting in EcoBank doing business day to day. And what we're looking at is the first spillover from the Eurozone crisis. I think the Eurozone crisis seems to have turned a corner. We've got growth projected at 1.1% next year, which is a lot better than the moderate contraction this year. But it's still, who knows really what's going to happen there. It could turn out quite poor next year. US monetary policy tightening, I think that's what everyone's been looking at over the last couple of months, particularly with the whole debt crisis negotiations that nearly led to default. That's a major problem when US monetary policy tightens. What we see is US bond yields go up, and that affects bond yields, sovereign bond yields across Africa. So we're getting higher, increased pressure on interest rates for sovereigns to increase across Middle Africa, which raises their debt servicing costs, which is negative. Slowing growth in China, that's another problem because China takes a lot of the raw materials from Africa to process to then sell to developed economies and to other emerging markets. So if they're obviously slowing, then they're not going to be demanding so much. Political instability, also countries like Mali, we recently saw how devastating that impact can have. But I think overall, political instability has been reducing over the decades in Africa, and I think that's a trend that we'll continue to see. But external commodity price shocks are real, and they continue on a regular basis. And if we suddenly saw oil spike to $150 again, as we saw in 2008, if the US economy defaulted in January, which I think is unlikely, but it does just show that it's possible. And then finally, just developed economy, financial sector instability. That is what kicked off the whole global crisis. And banks in the West really are still struggling in many jurisdictions. And the impact on that on Middle Africa, as well as ECOWAS, is that we have reduced capital flows coming into the region, and that prevents businesses from borrowing, having access to credit to develop their own opportunities. So those are the main things that really are a problem, and I think we need to remain aware of them. However, what we do have are the rewards. Very strong growth across Middle Africa, particularly in West Africa. And as you can see from this slide, Sierra Leone is the top performer. 17% this year, maybe nearly 14% this year. And that really is something that we are very keen to remain part of those success stories. So with that, I think I'll end here and hand over very quickly for any questions, because I think we're running slightly late. But if anyone has a question, happy to answer it. Or if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, I'd be happy to answer questions then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Angus. Just with your permission, Angus, I might forgive my pronunciation as well earlier. All of the presentations will be made available on the DMA website, and I hope on the Homestrings website as well. But Angus, I hope you're with us for a little while if people do want to have a chat with you. We're very pleased now, and thank you, Angus, as well, for wrapping up so neatly. We're very pleased now to welcome the Head of Finance and PPPs of the African Development Bank, Nazid Taz Anavaripo.
I think it's the wrong one. Well, when they are changing. Good morning, everyone. I am Tess Anvarapur. You are not the first one who cannot pronounce my last name. Everyone cannot. Actually, I am the Director of Business Development in the bank. Currently, I carry two hats in the bank. One is business development for the bank. The other one is establishment of a new infrastructure vehicle for infrastructure delivery in the continent. So I have a very heavy weight on my shoulders. Today, my presentation will have two different sessions. One will be on African Development Bank. I think we heard about economic outlook. Maybe it is time to look at the practicalities and what's happening on the ground. And the second presentation will be on Africa 50, the new infrastructure vehicle of the bank. I call this presentation Game Changers. I think when I met Eric, it was 5 years ago, I just joined the bank. And I was in Chicago for a conference, 3 days. I was depressed after this conference because everybody only talked about issues, problems, conflict, hunger, and nothing else about Africa. I flew from Chicago to Washington. I was very sad. Then I met Eric. He was challenging Zolig. I didn't have time. I saw him for only 2 minutes. I had to leave for the airport. I gave him my card. I said, one day, we have to work together. I think that day is arriving. But that US trip, right after I joined the bank, made me decide to have this presentation one day and only talk about good things in Africa. Sorry, but it's not working. Okay. So, since we are talking about West Africa today, I would like to start with a big success story in Senegal, a game changer. I always tell both the president, the prime minister, and also finance minister, please challenge me if these projects, any of them, would have been delivered without African Development Bank, and I know they cannot. In 2009, we started working on an airport project in Senegal. When we arrive in the country, immediately we look at the landscape, we look at what is happening. The airport was 5 hours away from the city. They were trying to move the old airport to this new location. And if you would like to reach the airport, you have to drive 5 hours and you have to be there 2 hours before. I asked them, who's going to take this airport? And they justified immediately. 80% of the traffic will go to the touristic places. And I told them, is this the really gross story? Immediately they said, oh, we have a toll road. And then I asked them, how we are going to power the airport? Oh, we will use extra generators. That's not the way. They said, we have a power project. Okay, bring it on. Then, obviously, the power project was a coal power project, reason being that Senegal doesn't have hydropower resources. Senegal doesn't have coal. The only base load could be coal. Unfortunately, Senegal doesn't have coal as well. It has to come from South Africa or other places. So you had to enlarge the port. Then we decided to put all these 4 projects together. It was a tough job because you had to sell not only externally, also internally. Why you are doing 4 projects in one country rather than doing 4 projects in 4 countries and having more publicity? But we stayed strong because we know what we were doing. We integrated those 4 projects, and we created this new model called Integrated Infrastructure Approach. We were able to deliver financing of those projects in less than 2 years. We put only 180 million euro, but we facilitated 1.3 billion euro projects in Senegal. How all this happened in 2 years? It was partnership. It was motivation. It was motivating everyone around the table, and it was playing the unspoken role between the parties. African Development Bank worked with everyone, not only with the government, not only with private investors, other lenders, and also all social NGOs. How this happened? By gaining everybody's confidence. If you look at all those 4 projects, they are all private sector projects. And altogether, they create the much needed infrastructure backbone for the country. Only 3 years after, the port is fully completed, toll road is already operational, airport is 90%, and power plant is 40% in its construction. It means things are happening. I cannot tell you in details each one how much returns they are bringing to investors, but I can give you a range. Actually, it ranges between 16 to 20% equity returns. It means Africa offers very good returns today you cannot get anywhere else in infrastructure projects. These projects are extremely safe. I'll talk about that a little bit later in other slides. If you look at each of the projects, they basically, I'm sorry, but this is not working very well. They basically help the success of one another. This was the reason we put those 4 projects together. This was the reason we made sure that all the projects are integrated. We had a lot of challenges all the way. However, we came over all those challenges. A lot of people, they mentioned that risk will be very high in these projects. One of the risks they told us was, hey, elections are coming up, so probably a new government is not going to own those projects. Again, that's where we played a very important role. As the African Development Bank, we had the smooth transition between 2 governments, and we made sure that we obtained the buy-in of the new government. This model and creating this infrastructure backbone in the country immediately attracted other investors. When people, they saw that things are happening, we have now other 3 projects. One being a wind project, 125 megawatt. The other one is a huge farming, which is very interesting for agricultural sector and investor for agriculture. And the other one is Bamako Railway, which will open this infrastructure backbone to Mali. We replicated this model, Ivory Coast. 2 power projects and the first toll bridge in the continent. We financed 120 million, but we facilitated 720 million investments in the country. We replicated the same model in Kenya as well. Lake Turkana wind project is one of the projects. And this is the largest wind project in one place in the world, 300 megawatt, 8 cents kilowatt hour, and around 18 to 20% return to investors. Nigeria, again, the same model. We are about to invest 300 million and facilitate 2.7 billion. Again, average 18 to 20% equity returns. Cape Verde, very small project, but another game changer. We put only 15 million. We facilitated the 60 million euro project. However, I think this is very uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Beauty of this project is 40% increase in energy sector, production of energy, but 40% decrease in the energy prices. So basically, responsible investment for everyone. Again, returns are 18 to 20%. Where we are today, we tested and we proved success stories are happening. In the last 5 years, African Development Bank invested $5.3 billion in infrastructure sector. We facilitated $56 billion projects in energy, in transport, in ITC, and water, including private equity fund investments in infrastructure. We were not just a financier, but we worked to make sure that we're taking the lead. We will make those projects happen. We will make those projects safe for our investors. We will make those projects also fair for our countries. Our portfolio is very robust. In the last 7 years, 42 projects, $5.3 billion, we have 0 write-offs. Why is that? Because we mitigate all those risks when we are structuring those projects. All projects and all documentations are vetted by international reputable advisory firms, and all projects are structured at the highest standards, even higher standards than European or American standards, which tells you that portfolio is robust, which tells you that any investment you will be doing with African Development Bank, you will have very solid returns. I will not go through this. I think you all know that we offer a large tray of products to invest in infrastructure projects. We make sure that in any projects we go in, we come from every single different area to make sure that wherever we are needed and what the project is needing, we provide and we make sure that those projects are reaching the financial close. And of course, African infrastructure is one of the very unique investment opportunities for diaspora. Why is that? Infrastructure assets provide robust, safe, and steady returns. Most of you are managing pension funds or sovereign wealth funds monies. Therefore, you have long-term liabilities. They are going to match with long-term returns from infrastructure assets. Infrastructure assets offer secured cash flows backed by contractual agreements. Today, in Africa, we are still lucky to have traffic guarantees. We are still lucky to have power purchase agreements. And they are long-term investments. Therefore, infrastructure assets are safe assets, and also they are good investment opportunities for diaspora. And if you want to walk far, let's walk together. This is African proverb. Thank you.
Taz, thank you very, very much again for that presentation. One more round of applause there for Taz. Before I introduce myself and actually begin my own presentation, I want to make a quick announcement. We have a surprise, actually. We have the inaugural Excellence in Infrastructure Investment Award that we are bestowing today on Taz Anavaripur, my very good friend, a little bit nervous. One thing that she hasn't told you, she's very modest about her achievements. When I first met Taz, she had just come back from Senegal, and we talked about her vision, what we were trying to do at the time at Gravitas. We hadn't even conceived of Homestrings at the time. And she told me this very small vignette about how she was called in by Senegal, not speaking French, not having had any exposure to the culture, and persuaded the government to take on this integrated framework, which she conceived on behalf of the bank. Her ability to innovate, to think through, to conceptualize, and to implement are unique in the industry and unique on the continent. And so Taz, on behalf of HomeStrings and our 10,000 followers and members and institutional investors, I want to ask you to come up to the podium and receive the inaugural award, Excellence in Development Finance for 2013.
Well, this is really a surprise. I think I can cry. I remember when I joined the bank, when I got the first project, the airport in Senegal, there was a lot of oppositions in the bank. Everybody said that she doesn't speak French. And I told them, do you want projects to reach the financial close? Do you want those projects to happen and serve to people? Or do you want someone who speaks French? So it started that way. And it was an amazing partnership. There are three things in PPPs. One is actually preparation. And I always call it triple preparation, preparation, and preparation. The second one is a partnership. In Senegal, I think the beauty of it was we were able to call everyone around the table. It was amazing. In each meeting when we arrived in Senegal, everybody was there. People they involved in the project or not. For example, World Bank was not in the coal power project. IFC, they were not in the coal power project. They don't finance. And I knew that I had to do that project. In fact, when I went to the board approval, I told all board members, if you don't approve this project today, when you go home tonight, when you open your refrigerator to take a glass of cold milk for your son or daughter, please remember those people in Senegal. So everybody worked very hard. It was not only me, it was everyone. People, they are part of the projects, they are not part of the project. There was a third P, it was passion. And in fact, there was a fourth one, which was perseverance, and it was trust. We were able to build trust between the parties. Thank you for this.
Technology. Apparently, I need a password to access this laptop, and I don't have the password. Anyway, while this is setting up, my name is Eric Guichard. I'm the founder and CEO of HomeStrings.com, or HomeStrings Limited, a UK-based company. And I apologize ahead of time for not having the appropriate accent that goes with managing a UK-based organization. I want to thank you to this inaugural first Diaspora Investment Symposium. The intent here is to introduce a brand new paradigm. I know many of you have come up to extraordinary speakers such as Taz and immediately asked the question, how do I invest in your project? Well, I am here to tell you that question is now answered, and that if you have $1,000 to invest or $10 million to invest, we've created the platform for you to facilitate that linkage between those two. Let me talk a little bit about what has motivated us. I'm originally from Guinea, Conakry, so I'm actually a native French speaker. But I'm also a former World Bank staff, and so I have followed the development, the evolution, if you will, of the African continent in terms of economic performance. And I found it very frustrating to wake up every morning, pick up the FT, read about growth stories and various projects, and not be able to invest in those projects or participate as a member of the diaspora in those projects. And so that desire led to the creation of Homestrings, which incidentally is a combination of two words, which my wife came up with, homesick and heartstrings. She actually is claiming ownership of the copyright, just in case. One of the key things that we have realized is remittances. Remittances are extremely important. They become even more important as policymakers have discussed the need to channel some of those remittances towards, quote unquote, the productive sector. And so when you look at the numbers, they are significant. About $500 million or more flows from the West to the emerging markets, and that doesn't even include intra cash flows, i.e. cash flows or transfers that are happening between countries within the continent of Africa, i.e. Ghanaians who live in South Africa who are looking for investment opportunities in Ghana, Kenyans who live in Tanzania who are looking for investment opportunities in Kenya. And if you were to include that, which hasn't been estimated yet, I mean, the number is quite significant. But in addition to that number, there's an even more important number, and that's what I call the agency number, and that is what percentage of those flows is actually looking for investment opportunity. Luckily for us, my friends at the World Bank have pegged that number at about 25% of flows received, at least in the case of Africa. So Africa receives about $60 billion. Okay. Is it small caps? Huh? Okay. Always those little details. About 25% of the $60 billion that Africa receives is actually looking for investment opportunity. That's $15 billion a year, growing at a clip of 10 to 15% a year. Why is that important? Well, in absolute, it's a big number. In relative, it's even a bigger number. When you compare that to development financial assets that are available, that are actually dwindling given the increased fiscal tightness that we're seeing on the public side, the numbers are a multiple of those development finance dollars. And so the key question is, how do you get the diaspora to invest in projects in such a way that their investments are treated as institutional assets, but more importantly, that they actually participate in the growth story and also earn a return, i.e. be a wealth building instrument. And so the big challenge is, how do you take one individual who wants to take $10,000 and make him equal to an institutional investor who wants to invest $10 million? Well, luckily for us, the FCA and the SEC have approved crowdfunding rules. Crowdfunding is the ability to pool capital from individuals and institutions into a single vehicle and have that vehicle be treated as an institutional investor into the underlying investment opportunity. Pipelines such as the one that Taz explained, or opportunities that will now be equally available to institutional investors as it would to individual investors. So for us, the important thing is creating a platform that facilitates not only the review of opportunities such as Taz, but also the access to those opportunities in increments that are easy for the individual investor under a regulated framework. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly go over how does one access the deal pipeline that is available that basically provides access to the growth story in Africa and potentially elsewhere. Is it S or investment? One investment? Yeah. Okay. No, that didn't work. No. Oh, sorry. I see what the problem is. Here we go. Great. Yeah? All right, cool. Great. This is Homestrings. I'm sure many of you have seen it, because if you're in the room, you had to register, right? So I'm not going to go through the whole registration process. But what I'd like to do is go fairly quickly to what the catalog is on the public site, and then I'll go into, oops. I understand the risk, absolutely. I don't want to add it to my exception. Do I do this? Ooh, okay. Help? All right, the techies. Anyway, what I'm going to show you is basically one, how do you access the platform? I'll skip the whole registration process, but two key things. One, we have a fairly robust know your client requirements because we use the banking system to basically transact your investments. We will be adding PayPal and some of the other methods of payment, which in turn also use the banking system. So we have to provide KYC, AML information to our administrators who themselves have to make sure that you guys are not doing things that you're not supposed to be doing on the platform. Number two, the way we go about identifying opportunities is that we have a network of partners, broker-dealers, banks, development agencies, who provide us with investment opportunities, i.e. limited partnership opportunities, which we then list on the platform. And once we list those on the platform, we then signal to you the availability of those opportunities. Are we set? Where's home strings? That's Twitter. I'll get it. Yeah. Yep. Thank you. All right. So you would receive a notice of availability of investment opportunities. Currently, you receive that through the newsletter, through investment alerts, and soon you'll be receiving it through direct mail from HomeStrings, giving you direct access to those opportunities. It doesn't help to be blind. Okay. Where's the @ sign? Here we go. Yeah. There we go. Great. So right off the bat, this is the catalog. Because we are doing this event today, we've actually organized this in order of the sponsors of the symposium. So you'll see here on the right-hand side all of the sponsors who are here in the room who will be presenting to you over the next few hours. So this is the catalog. The summary here is essentially a synopsis of what the investment opportunity is about. Then you basically would open up the fact sheet. And the fact sheet is structured in such a way that you have all of the key information that goes into the decision-making process. Macroeconomic context, our perception of what risk is, what does the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the IMF say about the country in which the transaction is taking place? What do the advisors to the deal say about the transaction itself? And then any sort of presentation or additional material that you may need to make up your mind. We give you some additional information about the history. One second, if I can get this right. Yeah, here we go. So our assessment of what the impact is, and we assess impact in terms of socioeconomic change, whether it creates jobs, whether it improves quality of life, whether it facilitates urbanization. And in terms of risk, we look at the commercial risk. What is the potential risk of default? And that's a subjective assessment that HomeString basically judges. I won't go into too much of the things here. On the right-hand side, we do an assessment of what the development impact is on a number of key factors provided by the Millennium Challenge goals, which apparently will be changed. And then below that, we have our assessment of what we think are important in terms of impact criteria. Then after doing all this analysis, there's many links, you can then comment on the transaction. So you can comment on this, write a review, a report, or an opinion. And if you're happy with that, you can then go straight and invest. There's a minimum investment there. And that leads you straight to the summary of key documents, what currency you'd like to invest in, how much you'd like to invest in, knowing that the minimum is $5,000. the name of the bank that you will be wiring your funds from, and your acknowledgement of having read the terms. Then once our administrator receives that information, they'll contact you to make sure that the funds are credited to your account. And once they credit to your account, they will show up on your dashboard. All right, your dashboard basically shows all your holdings in what proportion. It also shows you suggestions of other similar investment opportunities. Here we go. So this particular client of ours, an institutional client, is holding a REIT from Nigeria, Rwanda's first Eurobonds, and an interest in a Congo cement factory, cement factory exports. On the right-hand side, this entity is qualified, has been verified, has listed its preferences in terms of region, and at the bottom here on the left-hand side, you see some suggested investments. And if after all this you want to talk to some individuals, you can actually click here, put in your email address, put in some message. This is actually one of the messages I got from one of my dearest friends. And someone at Home Savings will receive a message and respond to you right away. So on that note, I'm going to wrap up. And if you have any questions, we will take them later. All of the presentations that you will see during the panel are actually uploaded to each respective fact sheet. So if you have your iPhone or your tablet or whatever, you can actually log on and follow the discussion, look at the terms of the transactions that are being described here, and use it as a basis for your Q&A. On that note, hope you have a very good session, and again, thank you for coming.